Hi, everyone. You are listening to Radio Cherry Bombe, and I'm your host, Kerry Diamond, coming to you from Newsstand Studios at Rockefeller Center in the heart of New York City. I'm the founder and editor of Cherry Bombe magazine. For today's episode, I'm chatting with Rebekah Peppler, the writer, cookbook author, and food stylist. I know a lot of you dream about moving to Paris. I do too. Well, Rebekah did just that several years ago and changed her life in the process. She's written 3 beautiful books inspired by her new life, and the latest is called Le Sud. It's all about the south of France, and it is a gorgeous book. Rebekah is here to tell us all about it and just what it took to make that big life leap. If you're looking to make a big change in your life, this episode might be just what you need today. Stay tuned for my chat with Rebekah. Today's episode is presented by Kerrygold. Kerrygold is the iconic Irish brand famous for its beautiful cheese and butter made with milk from Irish grass-fed cows. I am a Kerrygold superfan, and I had the good fortune to travel to Ireland with the Kerrygold team a few years ago. I met farmers, cheesemakers, the folks who inspect the butter and grade the cheese, and I even met the cows. It was an unforgettable trip, and I loved getting to know more about the world of Kerrygold. I learned the differences between the Kerrygold cheeses, and I'm going to share some of my favorites with you. There's Kerrygold aged cheddar, classic and rich. Kerrygold reserve cheddar is sharp and bold, thanks to an extra year of aging. Kerrygold Dubliner is a robust aged cow's milk cheese that's nutty, sharp, and sweet, all at once. Then there's Kerrygold Skellig, which is tangy and crumbly with a butterscotch-like sweetness. And one more to shout out, Kerrygold Cashel Blue Farmhouse Cheese. It's a perfect blue in my book, with that signature creaminess and tang. I love it for everything from snacking to salads. I highly recommend visiting Ireland, but you don't need a trip to Ireland to figure out your favorite Kerrygold cheese. Just a trip to your local supermarket, gourmet shop, or cheese shop. Visit KerrygoldUSA.com to learn more about Kerrygold's iconic cheese varieties, to browse recipes, and to find a store near you. This episode of Radio Cherry Bombe is supported by Open Table. I'm excited to announce that we'll be back on the road later this spring and summer with Open Table for our Sit With Us community dinner series, which highlights amazing female chefs and restaurateurs in the Cherry Bombe and Open Table networks. It's been such a treat meeting so many of you at our dinners across the country. Our next series of Sit With Us dinners will take place in Dallas, Atlanta, New Orleans, and Portland, Oregon. We'll be announcing the restaurants and dates of the Sit With Us dinners soon, so stay tuned. Keep an eye on our Instagram and make sure you have the Open Table app downloaded. Now, let's check in with today's guest. Rebekah Peppler, welcome to Radio Cherry Bombe.
I'm so happy to be here.
Congratulations on your book, because
Thanks.
It is truly beautiful and you can tell how much love went into it.
Love and sleepless nights.
Tell people how you wound up in Paris, because this all starts with you moving to Paris.
Absolutely, yes. So back in 2018, I was living in New York working as a food stylist and started thinking about splitting time between New York and somewhere else. I really wanted to write more. I was feeling like I was kind of going to get stuck on that path, and I wanted to make sure that I was kind of on the path I always wanted to be on, which was writing books. Paris kind of fell a little bit into my lap. It wasn't really the long-term game plan, and yet here I am long-term many years later. But I was having coffee with a friend, and I mentioned to her thinking about splitting time between New York and somewhere else, like maybe Paris is the place. And she immediately was like, oh my gosh, I have a friend that is looking to switch apartments for a summer. I took her up on it and cut to summertime in Paris. And to be honest, I didn't love it. I didn't speak the language. I didn't have any friends. Like I was just, trying to sort my life and figure out how to become a writer. A couple weeks in, I was like, something switched. I felt this connection with the city that I hadn't felt before. And I thought, maybe this is the moment that I can dig in and maybe start splitting time between New York and Paris. I'll go back to New York, get the visa stuff in order. I love a list, so I'll do all the things that check off all the items on the list, and then I'll come back to Paris in like a year. A week after that, I walked into a perfume shop in the Marais and fell in love with a woman for the first time. That sped up my move to France. Went back to New York about a week or so after that and booked a one-way ticket to Paris and started splitting time between Paris and New York. She's wonderful. She's actually the illustrator of the book and is pictured in the book. We are not together anymore. We have a very fun getting together and falling apart romantically story.
When you spoke at Jubilee, you used the most beautiful French term to describe what happened when you first met her.
I like to shorten the version of the story, but I'll give you a little bit of a longer one. So basically, I walked into this perfume shop in the Marais and saw this beautiful woman behind the counter, and they call it in French like a coup de coeur, like a hit to the heart, really. And it was just this immediate realization that something had changed or something had come to light that I knew nothing about myself before.
So romantic.
Really, very romantic. Our story was very romantic in all the ways, good and bad.
You're going back and forth at this point.
Yes. So basically, I get a one-way ticket. I start splitting my time. I'm working towards my visa at the same time, which is not necessarily the way you should be doing it. But
how should you be doing it? Because I know there are going to be some people who are like, oh, I want to move to Paris. I want to hear how Rebekah did it.
Well, it's actually a question that I can't answer because it's so unique to each person. I was on one visa and then I switched to another visa, and now I'm on a third visa, Passeport Talent visa.
Are they hard to get?
Yeah, that one's kind of the hardest to get. It's pretty exclusive. It's the one that I went for when I first started applying for the visa. Got all the way through the process, got it, then showed up in Paris with it, ready to get let in. Went to my appointment at the prefecture, and they were like, oh, this isn't valid. We don't have this visa for your class anymore. You have to go back to New York, restart your process, and apply for this other visa. I cried a lot in the first year and a half to 3 years of moving there because that's how long it takes, really. It depends. When my partner came in, she came out on a visitor visa and it was really easy to get. But it's also because, I had learned the hard way and we hired a guy. Now I hire people to do that work. I did everything on my own. I messed up a ton of stuff, really got myself into holes and then had to kind of dredge myself out of them.
Did you not hire the guy because you didn't know you could hire a guy?
I knew I could hire a guy, but I also didn't have a lot of money at that point in time. And I'm a pretty stubborn person and I like to do everything myself. So it takes a lot of mistakes for me to get to the point where I realize that somebody with skills and knowledge and experience doing the thing should probably be doing the thing.
Were you confident you could make a living?
Yes. I'm a freelancer. So I don't think that the move to France was necessarily a fear of mine that I was going to have to, start a French company and be working in a French office. That was never the goal. The goal has always been to work for myself, and I still work for myself. Haven't had to step into a French office yet. The French office is my dining room table. I think I was more fearful, less of making a living because I was already on a career path in New York, more so of switching careers into writing full-time, which is always a scary step when you're, switching over from one thing to the other. But I think even scarier when you're doing it in a different country and also do something you really, really love. It's wonderful and terrifying. You don't want to mess it up. You don't want to have to go back and do something you love less. That was more the fear. But fortunately, it worked out.
In New York, you were a food stylist. Mm-hmm. How did you become a food stylist?
Yeah, but that's a fun story, too. I went to university in Wisconsin and really wanted to write about food. I studied journalism, news editorial, and I knew that hard news was not my thing. So I knew I wanted to write about food, but I didn't know how necessarily to get into the publications that I wanted to write for. So I decided I needed some knowledge, and I applied for pastry school at the French Culinary Institute, which is now ICE, in Soho. I did night school. I worked during the day. I worked at Dean and DeLuca. The program had these lovely internship programs, and I got kind of slotted into food television show. And I was working on the production side of things, but the food stylist was always nearby. And whenever I had a moment, I tiptoed in to see what that job was all about, because at that point, no one was really talking about food styling as a career. So I did that. I worked a little bit in the kitchen, the EP on the show. And then when I graduated, Lauren Dean, the executive producer on that show, hired me to work with her and launch 2 shows for what was just launching Cooking Channel. So I worked with Lauren for quite a bit. We were at the CBS offices, 2 shows for Cooking Channel, and she called me into her office one day. I was a researcher, and she said, Rebekah, I don't have the budget for it, but I need a food stylist. I think you'd be really good at this job, and I know you don't know anything about it, so you can make mistakes, and I will take them with a grain of salt.
Be indulgent.
Exactly. You can ask me questions. You can learn.
Were there things from your childhood or high school where you were creative in that way?
Absolutely. Yeah. I always had a creative eye. I was, always taking photos. Never became a photographer, but I think, especially with food styling, knowing what the food looks like from behind the camera when I'm looking at it, so I don't have to step behind the camera or look at the screen, has been really helpful for me, especially when I was starting out. But yeah, there's a through line that you don't see when you're in it, kind of muddling through, hoping for the best and working hard and making mistakes along the way. But I think often the mistakes you make lead you to the thing you're supposed to be doing.
Do you art direct all your books?
I do. Yeah. Yes, I haven't lost the control angle. I work with Joanne Pye as the photographer for all 3 books, and she's phenomenal. I love working with her. She's a dear friend, excellent collaborator. She has a lot of ideas too, and she's also very open to collaboration and discussion and allows me to kind of get in there and dictate kind of what I'm seeing, and then she'll take it and run with it. One of the shots, the one with 2 backs, it's right opposite the dedication page. That's actually my partner and my first girlfriend, Iris, the woman I saw in the perfume shop. That was the first photo I thought of when I thought of Le Sud. Even before I wrote a single word on the page, that image is what I wanted to create. Cut to years later, Joanne and I in the rocks of Marseille under like noon sun, sweating, and I'm like on a rock 50 feet away, and she's like trying to shout to me in the wind, and we're getting all of these shots together, and we're trying to call each other to hear each other and make it work. The inspiration often looks a lot easier than the process to get to it.
It looks so effortless and
Thank you.
Beautiful and timeless.
Thank you. It's a lot of effort goes into that effortlessness.
Tell us why food. You're a creative person. You wanted to write. You could have drifted in any number of directions.
I could have. There's so many why food moments, but I think the root of it is, my mom is a librarian. We had books on books on books on books in our house, and I would say quite a good portion of them were cookbooks. And I was taught, you hear people say, like, I read cookbooks like books. I didn't really differentiate them when I was younger. And so that's what I hope for with my books, too, is that they, are able to be sat down and read. But for me, food is just a lens to get the story on the page, especially for Le Sud when I wanted to tell this kind of story of Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur in a larger way. I love food. It's my favorite part of the day, multiple times a day. It's what I talk about while I'm eating to get to the next one. I know I'm talking to someone that does the exact same thing. And
Probably why Paris was at the top of your list.
Yeah. Well, actually, Paris was at the top of the list because I went to French pastry school, and I was deciding between the French Culinary Institute in New York and Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, and I chose New York first.
All right. So you're in Paris. At what point do you think I can do a cookbook / lifestyle book? Because your books aren't pure cookbooks.
No.
But they're sort of lifestyle cookbooks. What made you think, I could do a book based on this experience?
Yeah. Well, so I moved to Paris. Iris and I broke up pretty quickly after I moved to Paris. It's a spectacular, fun story, which I'll tell at a later date. I'm trying to write it down, as all writers are trying to write down the big moments in their life. But I'm living in Paris, and I am trying to meet friends, right? And I realize that there's this culture of apéro, this apéritif culture of, meeting for a drink before dinner, after work, separating kind of the workday and the evening, that also kind of has this component to it. So you can do it quickly and then go on with the rest of your night, or you can continue and linger and kind of have that become your evening. For me, as an introvert, that was very seductive, right? That I could go in, I could meet somebody new, could have a drink, have a snack, and then say I had a dinner and then go home and recover.
Did you have friends in Paris?
No.
So you really went over there, didn't know anybody, didn't know the language?
Yeah. Yes, I did. When I think back to the person that I was when I did that, I am very proud of her. I hope I would be able to do it now, but it was a very perfect moment in my life to be able to do that.
Tell us what you were drinking and eating during these quick little get-togethers.
Exactly. Basically, the concept of apéro is you can come in and you can have often low alcohol by volume drink. So a glass of wine, a Kir Royale, which is going to be creme de cassis and champagne or sparkling wine. Any one of these really classic apéritif spirits and bottles. Suze, Lillet, Pernod Ricard, pastis. Depending on the season, you're going to have pastis in the summer. A beer, there's this beautiful bottle called Bière Piquant, which is like a bitter orange liqueur that you can actually add to beer. So there's all these kind of historic aperitifs you can have, or you can just have a lovely glass of wine. And usually a little bite. Potato chips, olives, saucisson, something little that's not going to stop your appetite, but rather open it up.
I was in Paris last June. I was shocked how many people were at the cafes outside drinking beer. How many young people.
Yeah. You can have half beer, half lemonade. You can have beer piquant. You can have any of these options. But I will say that in the last few years, the kind of craft beer scene has really exploded in Paris too. So there's a lot more options.
So that's the inspiration for Apéritif.
That was the inspiration for Apéritif, yes. The first book. I'm having these experiences and it's opening up both friendships and also the culture of France in a way that I just hadn't really experienced as an American. I realized at this time, I'm there to start writing more. And so my brain is already kind of in that mode of like, what can I write about? Like, what feels authentic? And what do I want to write about? And what do I want to learn more about?
Were you scared? Because French culture is so specific. And if you look at TikTok and Instagram right now, it's filled with, well, probably because my algorithm, I love French things in Paris. It's all like, don't say this in French. Don't do this in France. Do this in Paris and not this.
Mm-hmm. No, I wasn't afraid. I think I was just really open to learning. And so I emailed my agent. I'm not seeing this book anywhere. I think the most recent book on French aperitif had been written like 10 years prior to that. I wanted to do a modern kind of young person's take on what Aperol in France looks like right now. The history has to come into it, but what does it also look like today?
Had you done a lot of recipe development at that point?
Yes. Yeah. So I was a freelancer food stylist, but I was also freelance writing and recipe development and testing and going into test kitchens. I was at BA, I was at Food and Wine. Like I was kind of all over the place and had my kind of fingers in all of these different pots. I do aperitif. It goes well. The next book becomes à table, which basically takes the entire French table from apéro all the way to digestif. So I get to add desserts in there, which is, still my thing. But I get to kind of do the full table. It's not just drinks and snacks. It's drinks and snacks and mains and sides and dessert and drinks at the end.
I love that you say the full table. À table is a gorgeous book.
Thank you. I love that book. I will say, too, Apéritif definitely is a cookbook, but it's smaller. We decided to do it as a bar cart size. You can kind of like slip it onto your bar cart, put it by your bottles. It doesn't take up too much space. So À table is the same size as Le Sud. So it felt, for me at least, the first real cookbook that I wrote. And it's very special. We shot a lot of it in Paris. We did shoot actually some of it in the south of France and then some of it in Burgundy as well. Same with Apéritif. We shot up in Normandy, kind of all over the city. I'm not a studio stylist. I love to be out. I love to make life harder for myself. But I also think that it adds this like transportive, evocative quality.
Why do you think people had such a big reaction to À table?
The book came out in 2021, so it was cusp pandemic. I didn't do a in-person tour for that book like for Le Sud and like I did for Apéritif. It was all online, which worked out well for me. I was still very sick with long COVID, so I wouldn't have been able to kind of handle it energetically. But I think people connected to À table because it was this cusp moment where we were all so ready to start gathering around a table again and start cooking for other people. The book is so centered around the home and the table that it felt like the right time for it to come out, even though at the time it felt really hard.
How are you doing now? How's your health?
It's better. Maybe not 100%, but it's not the same. I definitely have a different body coming out of it than I went into it with and have had to learn that body anew, which has been challenging and also really gratifying. But I can do so much more now. Like, I fly here to New York. I can have this conversation with you. I'll be able to go out to dinner tonight. I'm going to be tired, but at least like I'm not going to be wrecked for 2 days after. I can't imagine doing this even a year and a half, 2 years ago.
How did the experience change you?
The positive things that came out of it were still learning this, but learning how to rest, like truly rest and truly recover, because at that point in time, setting boundaries became a really big thing. Also, Le Sud came into my life, the south of France, not the book, came into my life in a deeper way during that time. I got sick in March 2020, so it was kind of the early pandemic. Right at the beginning, I was in Paris. I think I had like maybe 6 steps a day. I would just lay in bed, crawl to the bathroom, and crawl back to bed. Like there was no walking possible. And I was alone too, so there wasn't a lot of cooking happening, right? Months and months later, I'm still really sick. I'm really weak. I have all these health problems, heart palpitations and pain and fatigue at a level that I had never experienced in my life. All my doctors were saying, your tests are coming back clean. Your lungs look fine. At that point, I couldn't even take a deep breath. It's anxiety. I got all of that gaslighting to the point where I finally was like, okay, there's not enough research that's been done yet. I'm the only one that can be in my body, and I'm the only one I can trust at this point to heal myself. And so what heals me? And the answer for me has been and always is the sea. So I made a game plan. I was like, I'm going to take myself to all the seas I can get to in France. I'm going to go first to Provence, and then I was going to go to Biarritz. And then I was, if that didn't work, I was going to go up to Normandy and Brittany. And I went down to a city called La Ciotat, which is this like lovely little port town. And I set myself up. I was a 7-minute walk from the beach. I saved all my energy, walked to the beach once a day, sat at the beach until I had enough energy to walk back. And that was my entire day. I wasn't able to work. I couldn't really look at my phone or at screens. And then at that moment in time, the other really wonderful thing that the pandemic brought me came into my life, which is my partner now. She and I started talking while I was in the South. I ended up flying to Los Angeles a couple months later and bringing her back to Paris. And she moved. She moved, probably I think 8 months after that.
Oh my gosh, I have so many follow-up questions.
I know.
Okay, where do I start? When you were having these conversations with the doctors, were there any moments where you doubted yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Often, especially in the beginning, because this is something I had never experienced before. I was the only one in my life that was experiencing it. There weren't online communities that were really, there were a few that had been started, but they were terrifying to read. Like you'd go on and it was just it was real. It was terrifying to write also, but I was just hearing really scary stuff and it wasn't helping me heal. It was kind of bringing me into a darker, scarier, more alone place. And so I kind of had to stay away from those at the time and go inside and see kind of what worked for my healing. I don't know how other people experienced COVID, but I felt the virus move through my body. And so I would change symptoms every week or every 2 weeks. Sometimes they would only last a couple days. And I think the scariest moment was maybe 6 weeks in, had what they called COVID toe, which turns out is just stabbing pain in your toes that I had no idea where it was coming from at the time. And I had all these things, but then I started to feel it move from my brain part of my body down into my chest. And you could feel a weight on your chest, this crazy fizzy feeling in my body. I could actually feel the virus moving on to the next part. And that was the part that was scariest to me because I could feel it moving into my lungs. And that was when, basically my doctor was like, do not go to the hospital unless you have to. It is triage. You don't want to be there unless you need to be there. And so she was videoing with me and basically showed me how I had to breathe in order to call an ambulance to go to the hospital. And that was the moment when I started to feel it kind of settle in my chest and it felt like something was kind of sitting on me.
When did the idea for Le Sud come to you?
Oh, there were so many moments. So Sarah, my agent, and I were talking around the time when Atab was being released, and she was like, what's next? You have any thoughts, any ideas? And my books come out in pretty short order. I like to have a project. And so I usually am kind of already thinking about what the next one, sometimes to my detriment. I probably should rest a little bit more. But I love having a big thing to sink my teeth into and really start researching again. What gets you excited? What are you interested in? Is it France? Are you thinking of expanding outside of France? I started going to the south of France when I first moved to Paris, 18. And so I got that kind of early on vacances energy of the South, which is so special. But then I started making friends, and I had friends move to the south of France and open restaurants all across the South. So I started going at different times of the year to visit them. And then I started a holiday at different times of the year because really a magical place.
People must be like, how does she have so much time? How can you afford to go there? It's a lot easier to travel around France.
It's so much easier.
And you have a lot more vacation time.
Well, I work for myself, so I am in charge of my vacation time. The flip side is you never stop working when you're a freelancer. So you go on vacation and you're just always on. The train from my house in Paris to Marseille, say, is a 3-hour train. I think it's probably 3.5 hours door to door. It's just really easy to get there. The things that I like to do in France are quite affordable, right? Eating and drinking, the produce, the wine, the spirits, the lemonade, everything is just, it's easier to live a really beautiful life.
Are you shocked by the prices here in America?
It's very, yes, wild.
Compared to Paris and the rest of France?
Yeah, it's crazy to look at a menu and see a glass at the same price as a bottle, and probably the same bottle that you can get in France. So I drink a lot less wine here than I do when I'm at home. And we do bring a couple special bottles with us each time to kind of share the bottles that you can't get, in the States to some dear friends. The other thing we bring is butter.
Wait, you bring butter from France? We have good butter here.
We do, but you have not had the butter that I bring. It's like a culture.
Are you allowed to bring butter?
You are.
Here? You are?
Yes. So cheese is a different category. But they're adjacent, right? And so butter-wise, I go to my place. They vacuum seal it for me, which is new, and I'm really into it. I throw it in my freezer for a couple nights, and then I put it in a bag and hope for the best.
We'll be right back with today's guest. Some of you know this, but Cherry Bombe is more than a podcast. We also have a beautiful print magazine that's dedicated to all things women and food. It's thick and printed on lush paper and filled with gorgeous photos, recipes, and stories. I'm the editor of the magazine and truly love working on every issue. If you are not a subscriber, I would love for you to subscribe. Subscribers get all 4 annual issues, as well as free shipping. Head to cherrybombe.com to snag your subscription. If you already subscribe, thank you. That means a lot to me. You can also purchase back issues on our website or pick up a copy of Cherry Bombe at your favorite magazine shop, newsstand, or culinary store. Check out our list of stockists on cherrybombe.com. Let's talk about this book.
Yes.
How did you decide what recipes would go in Le Sud?
Oh, it was hard. What I wanted for Le Sud for the recipes was to tell the whole story of the region, because Le Sud, Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, extends all the way from the border of Italy all the way through the Camargue region. There's pasta on this side and rice on the other side, and then a slew of other things in the middle, right? To very oversimplify this. And I wanted the recipes to be indicative of the region, to tell that story, but also then tell the story of the region now and my experience personally in the region. So there's a lot of personal anecdotes, a lot of storytelling coming through that has that personal lens to it, in addition to the history and the food culture. Choosing the recipes was kind of like putting a puzzle together of really classics you have to have. Ratatouille, which happens to be one of my favorite recipes in the world, so that was not hard to include. And then, you want to have a roast chicken, but I wanted it to be my roast chicken. Bring something that felt very indicative of the area and indicative of the life that I've lived in that area.
Tell us about your ratatouille.
Well, my ratatouille is quite traditional. I am a strong believer in cooking all the vegetables separately in just copious amounts of olive oil and then bringing them together. When I was working on Apéritif, the first book, my partner at the time and I had spent an entire summer cooking versions of ratatouille for each other and grading each other basically on it. It's very competitive. And she won. She absolutely won. And she changed my mind about how ratatouille should be cooked. But, when you cook it all together in one pan, even if all the vegetables are cut perfectly and they're all really, peak season produce, they lose a bit of themselves. Like the eggplant is a little bit less eggplant-like, and they
I'm listening
merge.
to you say this, and I'm like, that makes all the sense in the world. And I've always cooked them all together.
And when you cook them separately, it takes a lot more time.
A lot more dishes.
But
do you have them all going at the same time?
I don't, because I don't like washing dishes, and I don't have a dishwasher, and my sink is small. So I do one pan at a time, and if I'm lucky enough to be on a stovetop that has room for 2 pans at a time, then I'll do 2 pans at a time.
So this is a very indulgent, I'm going to say it like you say it, very indulgent ratatouille. Say how I feel like I say it all in one syllable.
My French accent is also terrible, so any native French speakers are going to correct me, but I say ratatouille.
Ratatouille. Okay.
Yeah.
I should be able to say it because it's also my favorite movie.
When you pay attention to each vegetable separately and give it its due time, you cook it to the place where it needs to be, and then you can combine them all together. It creates this layered experience. And so while it takes more time, it's worth it. And also ratatouille is one of those dishes that you should make a day in advance. I like to make it the day before I'm having people over, bang it out in that day. And then I have the beginning of the entire day that I'm actually having people in my house to do anything else that I want or make anything I want to make.
What else would you include if you were serving ratatouille to people? What else would be part of the menu?
So ratatouille is a really interesting dish because you can serve it for a lot of different occasions, right? You can have it for lunch with a side salad and maybe some baguette, or you can have it as a starter and then move on to your main course, your meats and your fish, etc. I personally like to serve it as the main course. I'm not a vegetarian, but I eat very vegetable heavy. It is one of my favorite dishes in the world. So if I can put a big green salad on the table, start with a beautiful apéro and maybe like some extra snacks to start, so you're not going in like crazy, crazy hungry. And then, a gorgeous baguette. My technique is that I slice it on the bias, but I don't slice all the way through. So you get all the slices, but you keep the baguette as its long form, and then people can rip off their pieces. There's this luxurious feeling of ripping off the end of a baguette, but then you're like grabbing the baguette and you're manhandling everybody else's portion of the baguette, and then you're ripping off too much or too little, and you never kind of get it right, and that evens out the playing field for everyone. And then you can have a beautiful dessert to end, and no one has filled up on one thing, and that's my favorite way to eat.
Roast chicken.
Roast chicken.
Tell us about your roast chicken.
Well, so there are a couple roast chicken recipes in the book. I don't have a favorite. So there's a market day roast chicken, which is kind of the classic. When you go to the market and you see the spinning poulet rôti, it's a magical experience.
Dripping on the potatoes.
So what I did was spatchcock my chicken and put the potatoes underneath and cooked it together. And so you're not getting that rotation, but you are getting all of that fat going right into where you want it, which is into your mouth. But then I also have a recipe for pastis chicken. I didn't really have much expectation for it. I like using spirits in my dishes as well, especially you buy a whole bottle of pastis. There's a gorgeous cocktail recipe at the start of the book which uses pastis. And if you're a pastis drinker, that's great because then you can keep drinking it. And so I wanted to be able to use it in other ways. And
did you invent pastis chicken?
I have not had pastis chicken before, though I cannot claim to have invented it. I'm sure someone else has done it. I had not seen it before.
And tell folks what pastis is. Some might be new to pastis.
So pastis is the drink that you drink at the beginning of a meal. It's got a really anise kind of fennel flavor, depending on the pastis that you buy. Different marks have different flavor profiles and different things that kind of come forward. But it's traditionally drunk in Marseille by the sea in the summertime. It's a drink that you pour long and you sip for longer, and you can keep diluting it with water. So basically, it's this clear liquid that comes in the bottle, and then there's this really fun chemical interaction that happens when you add water to it, where it becomes this like cloudy, thicker drink. Some people would say you should never serve it over ice. Some people say you always serve it over ice. A lot of contradictions in the French language and in French food culture. I personally like to add ice later on. I like my first glass with just really chilled cold water, but pastis is meant to linger, and you're meant to linger over it. And if you're lingering over something in the summertime, what happens? It becomes the temperature it is outside. And so I like to have a little bit of ice to kind of like add as I'm going. Same with rosé. So pastis chicken is chicken thighs. And then you're going to combine this with fennel bulb. So I basically took the inspiration from pastis, which has this like anise fennel flavor, and I just added as much fennel as possible into the dish.
I love fennel.
I love fennel too. There's a fennel salad in the book.
Cooked fennel?
I know. So there are two different things, right? So the fennel salad in the book is this crunchy, bright, fresh, beautiful thing to eat alongside other things. And then when you cook fennel, it becomes like sweet and caramelized and soft and like almost saucy in itself. Clearly, I'm a fennel lover, but this dish, I was really happy with the result because you get like all of this sweet, soft fennel, these crispy chicken thighs that you can throw on the table and absolutely keep a bread on the table with it and start dipping.
Do you marinate the chicken?
You don't marinate the chicken thighs, but I do pat them dry and season them with salt and pepper. And if you can do that the night before, that's even better because that really allows the seasoning to get all the way through.
At what point do you introduce the pastis?
During the cooking, it acts to kind of get that fond off the bottom of the pat, the brown pieces that you want back in your dish.
Let's talk about the pasta dishes
Yes.
in there because I love the names of the dishes.
Pasta in Provence, it's not something that you necessarily think of. Italy's thing, right? But Italy and France share a border, and there's a lot of overlap. When you go to Menton, the end city of France, right before Italy starts, you get, first of all, citrus, and then you get this pasta being over onto the side. There's really just a lot of crossing over. Two of the pasta recipes in the book, there are four. One of them is the pasta I crave every time I'm near the sea, and the other is the pasta to make when you're not. And
what's the difference between the two?
Well, fresh seafood and tinned seafood. And if you know me at all, you know how much I love tins. And I always kind of have them in the pantry. I'll start with a fresh seafood, which is, this like gorgeous clam pasta that I make with marinated lemons. So you thinly slice lemon.
A marinated lemon, you're just putting it in olive oil.
You're putting it in olive oil. I add
For how long?
Garlic. I basically warm it up. So I get the garlic golden, warm the oil up, and then I pour it on top of the lemon. So you're like almost flash cooking them, but they're
Changing
just
my
getting
life
soft.
with every piece of advice here.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Between the ratatouille and the marinated lemons, I'm all about this.
yeah. And you can leave them in the fridge for a month. They're a real game changer. They sit right next to my preserved lemons in the same fridge. But so the pasta, it's got shallots, it's got garlic, it's got these lemons, it has fresh lemon zest. I use a little pinch of saffron in there and then small clams with it. And so it has this pasta vongole vibe to it.
And you had some breadcrumbs, if I remember correctly.
Breadcrumbs.
Why the breadcrumbs?
It was less a inspiration from south of France and more just texture on top of texture, on top of flavor, on top of flavor. And when you kind of flavor these breadcrumbs, I think it just adds all these layers. The way to kind of make a recipe that is easy to make feel like it's a little more complex is to add those layers in. It's a great pasta without it. I've had it without it. It's delicious. But that extra little like je ne sais quoi is like,
I was just going to say something, but
yep, something,
je ne sais quoi makes that sound so much nicer.
Yes.
Okay, so the pasta you make when you're not by the sea.
So I live in Paris, sadly, yet live in the south of France, although it's a topic of conversation in our house very regular. When I'm not near the sea, this is the one that I make. So this one, it has anchovies, it has tin sardines. We found these beautiful tins while we were in the south of smoked sardines that I hadn't seen a lot of. But this is actually my partner's favorite dish in the book, I feel like. She asks for it regularly, and she's very specific about her pasta. So it's a win for me.
And this is very pantry-friendly pasta.
Very much so. Yep, absolutely. I mean, you're going to want to have fresh lemons in the house, but I think you should always have fresh lemons in the house. So that feels like a pantry item to me already.
Because you also have preserved lemon in this.
Yes, absolutely. You do preserved lemon. Double lemon. I have a preserved lemon recipe in the book. It's for preserved Meyer lemons if you have them. I like preserved Meyer lemons more than the standard Eureka lemon simply because the skins are so thin and you get just a different texture and a sweeter flavor. But you can use regular lemons in that recipe as well. And then you use fresh lemons juice as well. So it's adding those layers of flavor. You're getting acidity in a bunch of different ways. You're getting salt in a bunch of different ways. Try not to salt this dish until after you've added all the anchovies and the preserved lemons.
And you have capers.
And capers.
Yeah. So do you salt the pasta water a little less?
No. I wouldn't go heavy-handed on the salt for your pasta water, but you still want to get that flavor into the pasta itself. But I wouldn't salt the dish at all until you taste it. I am a big believer in having salt on every table. I think everyone has a different kind of tolerance for salt, and mine is very high.
What is the herb situation?
It's parsley. It's parsley.
Just parsley?
Yeah. This one is just parsley.
Okay.
You know, there's a lot of recipes with herbs in the book, including an herb salad vert, which is wonderful. But I wanted to make this really pantry friendly. Parsley is that go-to herb you either have in a pot on your windowsill or out in your garden, or you can easily get it at any store.
And it lasts longer in your fridge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You've given us so many amazing ideas for things to make. And I think we're all profiling you. It's like, if you want to get to Rebekah's heart, butter, fennel,
tin fish. Exactly.
And the ocean.
Maybe some wine in there too.
Okay, let's do a little speed round. What was your favorite childhood snack?
Oh my gosh. So I wasn't a lettuce eater as a child, as some children aren't, but I loved carrots. We would shred carrots and cheddar cheese and mix them together. Turns out excellent. I think about it all the time. There's a really classic French carrot frappe salad, which is just shredded carrots with a vinaigrette. And every time I eat it, I'm like taken back to my childhood and then like missing the cheese component of it.
Shredded carrot and shredded cheddar?
Yeah, like just like, you know, grate it on a box grater or whatever you have. And it's like, I think it was just my mom's way of getting me to eat my vegetables.
I feel like there's some fun recipe you can do, like some kind of souffle or some kind of carrot cheddar bake.
Oh, a carrot souffle. Yes.
I felt like that dish needed to be baked somehow or cooked somehow.
Right.
Interesting.
I mean,
okay.
Every once in a while when I have like carrot rape, I'll put like goat cheese on it and it like gets us closer to it.
What's your favorite food film?
Tampopo. I mean, to talk about storytelling within a story and getting these little vignettes and having it kind of all weave together. Sexy and fun and beautiful and weird and all the things.
We didn't get to talk about your travels through Asia recently, but what's left on your travel list? Where would you like to go next?
Well, yes. So we were just in Korea and Japan for 2 weeks right before book tour, which I don't know if I would recommend doing right before you go on a 2.5-month book tour, but it's definitely right back at the top of my list. Japan had always been on there. I fell deeply in love with Seoul, and I'm really excited to go back.
Are you streaming anything right now? You've been traveling so much, maybe not.
I've been traveling so much. I rewatched Killing Eve because my partner hadn't seen it, and I kind of forced that on her, and then we got really into it.
What's your favorite kitchen implement?
Oh, my scale. Truly, I think a scale is the thing you need in your kitchen more than anything else. I'm coming at it from a pastry chef's perspective. I use it every day.
Do you have a motto or a mantra that you live by?
I don't have one that I necessarily live by, but I do have one that I'm trying to implement into my life right now, which is to let go. I hold on to things. I focus, sometimes too much on one thing. I've been slowly practicing the art of letting go.
Okay, last question. If you had to be trapped on a desert island with one food celebrity, who would it be and why?
I think about this question a lot, and I feel very lucky that my answer is actually someone I know and love, and it's Melissa Clark. She's such a dear friend, and I would love to be stuck on a desert island with her. And there's so few people in my life that I trust fully to cook for me.
I think we'd all love that reality show.
Right.
You and Melissa Clark on a desert island.
Me too. If she's cooking for me, all I have to do is sit there, sign me up.
Well, Rebekah, congratulations on your third beautiful book.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for today's show. I would love for you to subscribe to Radio Cherry Bombe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a rating and a review. Let me know what you think about the show and who you'd like me to interview on a future episode. Our theme song is by the band Tra La La. Joseph Hazen is the studio engineer for Newsstand Studios at Rockefeller Center. Our producers are Catherine Baker and Elizabeth Vogt. Our associate producer is Jenna Sadhu, and our content operations manager is Londyn Crenshaw. Thanks for listening, everybody. You're the bomb.